All right, welcome to yet another episode of the Men's Cricket Podcast. It's episode 35, and like always, this is the place where we talk about all things women's cricket. Neha ji, kya haal hai? How's the last week been? And yeah, lot of games to talk about.
Hi, Akshay. Once again, really happy to be here. Another milestone we hit perhaps with episode 35. And yeah, things have been really fun, right? I mean, seeing India back in action, playing against Australia, this is, again, being looked at as an important series, probably a stepping stone too, right? As the World Cup is fast approaching. We also have Pakistan, South Africa playing at one end. And like last week, we were discussing, there's a bit of franchise cricket that's happening too. So just excited to, sort of unpack all of that. It's just that the World Cup is getting so close, a lot of important series happening, which has a lot of significance. As much as a lot of people just call it practice games, just like warm up games. I'm pretty sure each team is looking at it with a lot of seriousness and just a way to get a lot of areas and bases covered. So excited to see how where this conversation takes us.
I mean, the World Cups were 11 days away technically at the time of the recording and 10 days away from the time of upload. So that's not a lot of time remaining, to be honest. And yeah, the competitive juices are flowing, and all those permutations and combinations of what kind of players we'll get to see, what kind of results we'll get to see. So lots to talk about on that front. Before that, of course, I wanted to do a tiny bit of addressal on my part. There were a few comments last week. Just wanted to talk about them before we sort of move ahead. And of course, folks, like always, please make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. And please make sure you subscribe to us if you haven't already. Firstly, of course, there were talks about why we speak about certain players and whatnot. I thought we had made it clear previously as well, and we will make it clear once again. We aren't here to sort of, take personal offense to certain players. We aren't here to sort of throw personal shades or shades that aren't exactly based on their performances on the field, secondly. And importantly, we have no bias. I mean, biases sure we do have. We have no agenda per se of saying why we don't want a certain player, apart from the fact that we think the Indian team might have other options, better options, or any other team might have better options than said player. And also, for some reason, people assumed that the last time when we spoke about Harmanpreet Kaur and then we spoke about why we felt that way of her, it wasn't because we thought she wasn't a good enough player. It was because we knew what her potential is and we wanted her to be able to play to that potential so that it helps Team India. People did assume that to be an apology, so I want to make that clear. I don't think we were apologizing then, and I don't think I will be apologizing now, because for us, we know where to draw the line. We aren't being personal about any players. We are talking about their performances. And if we do get it wrong, we are more than happy to wipe the egg off our faces. If, tomorrow, if Uma Chetri scores a century and makes it big in the World Cup, we'll be the first ones to happily admit to our folly and say, yeah, I mean, she's proven us wrong and we are anything but sad about it. And secondly, of course, one constructive criticism given to us was, where's the data? Why are you guys just talking about this? So I did want to put out some data in terms of why we felt, for instance, Uma Chetri was probably not just as well suited as some of the other options available. So here the numbers go. They're also displayed in the graphic shown right now. Uma Chetri, when it comes to list A cricket, has an average of 18.6 in the 18 games she's played. And when it comes to T20Is, she averages 9 and has a strike rate of 19, the 7 T20Is she's played. And when it comes to WPL, she averages 13 and has a strike rate of 78 in the 9 games she's played. Now let's compare that with Tejal Hassabnis and Raghavi Bish. Tejal Hassabnis in the list A cricket, in her short list A cricket career, she averages 32 and has a strike rate of 70 in the 79 games she's played. And when it comes to ODIs, she averages 47 and has a strike rate of 79 in the 6 games she's played. And with Raghavi Bish, once again, list A cricket, average of 27 in the 31 games she's played, an average of 36 in the 2 T20Is she's played, and an average of 19 and a strike rate of 102 in the 7 WPL games she's played. So clearly, across all parameters, across formats, Raghavi Bish and Tejal Hassabnis both make a better case for themselves than someone like an Uma Chetri. Of course, we cannot discount the fact that Uma Chetri is a keeper herself and she adds more value that way as a backup keeper. All of that said and done, that's something we had already discussed last week, that Team India could have probably just taken that punt by going ahead with Richa Ghosh as their only keeper. But so as far as data is concerned, when it comes to batting, it clearly shows that of the 3 names that we had suggested last time, Uma Chetri probably is at the bottom. And again, not reflective of the kind of player she is, but as things stand, the other two definitely make a stronger case for themselves, and that was the whole point. So there you go. Hope numbers also, present that case for you, for those of us. But apart from that, yeah, that's all I had to say for it. So once again, to be clear, if we ever do sort of cross that line that we've drawn for ourselves and you guys point that out, we're more than happy to correct ourselves. I don't think we are here thinking that we are some experts who cannot be wrong or who will never be wrong. Of course, we are human. We will be making mistakes, and if we ever do that, and if you guys point that out, we will be thankful to you guys and correct ourselves. But last week wasn't one such occasion. Once again, if you guys still want to go at it and spam the comments, the world's your oyster, the comment section's your oyster, go for it. But yeah, that's something we wanted to address before we began. And also another short update. You might have seen, I mean, folks who follow our channel regularly might have seen that we unfortunately have had to pause Monday Night Live last week. And this might be the case with the Women's Cricket podcast as well going forward. And in which case, Neha and I have been thinking of doing something by ourselves. We will, of course, be sharing out information as and when it is relevant. Right now, we still are hopeful that, we might be able to continue it over here. In case that does not happen, we do have other plans. So rest assured, we will still be continuing the podcast. Maybe not on this channel, maybe not in the very same structure. It might be slightly different, slightly better. Who knows? But we will still be continuing it in the near future. So of course, stay tuned on our channel. We will be sharing those updates as and when possible. And yeah, that's that when it comes to updates. Now back to what we want to talk about, which is women's cricket. Neha, India Australia, the series, it is at 1-1 right now, of course. By the time the episode drops, the third ODI would be underway. And unfortunately, we don't know the result, although we will be hopeful of a certain woman in blue winning. But yeah, so far 1-1. What have you made of the series? What have you made of some of the names that you've seen across both sides?
Yeah, actually, I think the India Australia ODI series has been quite an interesting one so far. The first ODI, you'd think it's a rusty Australia coming into play, an ODI almost, after a span of 8 months. But the way they just kind of took to the format was like, quite fascinating to see, right? Chasing down 282, like, it was just another walk in the park, doing it in such clinical precision. I mean, to give you an impression, right, that Australia would want to go for the kill in the second ODI. And that's where India really, kind of stepped up their game. I know there are a few criticisms that we will talk about, but I still felt, 292 was not bad. Would have probably liked maybe a 20, 30 runs more. India could have probably crossed that envelope of 300. But I'd still take, 292. And the way the bowlers just came into the game, right? Absolutely gave nothing away to Australia, registering their biggest win, a first on home soil after 2007, right? A massive, massive win for the books, right? So India would definitely take a lot of confidence from that second win to keep the series alive at 1-1. And now the series moves its bandwagon all the way to Delhi. I think even Sushma Verma put out a reel, which was urging fans to come out in huge numbers, just support and get their voices behind the girls. So hopefully, we get to see that sort of reception for the girls. But all in all, yeah, the ODI series has definitely given us a lot of talking points and an impression of where the team is headed, because we always peg Australia to be, this team that's like right up there. We put them on a pedestal and we look at a bunch of things. But Australia too, have had a few areas of concern and have a little bit of tinkering and figuring out to do. But India too, we will again discuss it through the course of our discussion. They have again a few areas to sort of iron out. But so far, yeah, the series has been quite interesting. 1-1, and hopefully the third ODI again gives us a lot of reasons to sort of make our reductions.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how they've gone about their business, I've been mighty impressed with what the Indian side pulled off in the second game, because it's one thing to defeat this almost invincible Australian side, but it's another thing to do that with the margin in excess of 100 runs. It's the first time in the history of women's ODIs that Australia have lost by such a big margin. In fact, their previous biggest margin was way back, or rather was achieved way back in 1973 during the first Women's World Cup. So just goes on to show that's over 50 years of dominance. And again, that's not a small sample size. I mean, I don't think we've seen dominance of this kind in any sport for such a long period. We've seen dominance in general, but to be able to do that for such a long period goes on to show how good a side this is. But once again, fantastic performance from the Indian side. While I don't want to agree with you that, considering where India were at the end of the 20th over, 30th over, probably the 300 run mark was there to be breached. But you'll also have to then factor in, not having Jenny in that batting order, not having Amanjot as well for what it's worth. So this clearly wasn't a full strength batting lineup that we were looking at. And this was definitely a shorter batting lineup that we were looking at, because India bolstered their bowling. They brought in a couple of pacers. So given that, for India to be able to do this despite having just the 5 to 6 batters, the six being Deepti Sharma, that was fantastic to see. And once again, the cameos also towards the end. Radha Yadav, then there was Sneha Rana, that sort of helped them chip through and extend that lead. So that was also very good to see. Of course, we will talk about Smriti Mandan as well, and that fantastic 100. But before that, let's talk about that opening pair first, Neha. Smriti and Pratika. Smritika is what they're calling it, if I'm not wrong. But what have you made of that opening combination? Because we did have reservations when it came to Pratika. We spoke about how she's not played top tier opponents. She's not done too badly so far. She's gotten starts in both the ODIs, but that strike rate has definitely been an issue for them, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think to just talk about the opening duo of Smriti Mandana and Pratika Rawal, I think the duo has just been breaking records, right? To now reaching this absolute pinnacle of 1,000 runs in a calendar year for an opening duo. I think they've just been in that sort of a prolific form. It was just the two games, right? Switching partnerships of 70 and 114. I think it's just been very positive to see how the influence is rubbing off on each other. I know a lot of people will give me stick because of the whole run out incident that sort of happened. And I mean, it happens sometimes. You can't really help it. Unfortunately, both times, Smriti was like the, in the Venn diagram, the, element that was the commonality, so to say. Wouldn't look too deeply into that. But I think with Pratika, again, the concern was with the strike rate itself, right? I think in the first ODI too, it was yeah, it was 66.6, and then in the second one we saw it, be it 78. I think you would want your opening partner to just sort of be able to chip in with a lot more runs at a better clip. Smriti Mandana too, I think, spoke about this in one of the interactions that she is looking to put on this aggressive brand of cricket, just be able to do her thing. Second ODI gave us an indication of that. She brought in her century too, right? Her like the fastest for an Indian in ODIs too, which goes on to show that she's trying to sort of compensate, if not, just put out her best version and just compensate for those runs coming in there. Hopefully, yeah, Pratika will be able to increase her strike rate. It doesn't become a matter of concern. But in the first ODI, right, I just love the way Pratika was applying herself. I think it was like a 96 ball knock. She scored that 64 in the second one too. She was looking quite formidable till she was undone by Ash Gardner there. But all in all, yeah, I think the opening duo really sets the tone for the rest of the batters to come in. There was that middle phase where, in case we lose Smriti Mandana, Harleen Deol, Pratika Rawal, do they like sort of slow things down? Hopefully that won't be a trend or something that carries on to the World Cup. But all in all, yeah, just happy with the impressions that the kind of performances that Pratika and Smriti have put. Hopefully they can just carry on and continue breaking barriers and a lot more and score a lot more runs.
I mean, all in all, happy with the fact that they are scoring runs, because at the end of the day, cricket is a game that's won by the side scoring more runs. But that scoring rate is definitely a bit of a concern for me. Earlier, I mentioned if it would be a concern for them, correction, it will be a concern for Pratika Rawal in particular, because Smriti, once again, she's at least been attacking from her end. And despite being the senior player, she's sort of taken to that role quite seamlessly, and that's very heartening to see. But with Pratika, sure, you can take a bit of time to sort of get a start and everything. ODI as a format that lends itself into batters taking a bit of time and settling in and whatnot. But for her to just not ever pick up pace even after facing 30, 40, 50, 60 deliveries, that's what concerns me. Because let's just look at this tweet by Jeet, right? Again, a friend of the podcast, so I'm pretty sure I don't need to ask him his permission, and we'll definitely put the screenshot as well. There you go. First 15 balls, 8 runs, strike rate of 53. 16 to 30, strike rate of 127. 31 to 45, strike rate of 67. 46 to 60, strike rate of 67. And then look at that, 61 to 90, strike rate of 53. And last 6 balls, for what it's worth, just the 1 run scored before she was dismissed. Which means that she's not maintained a strike rate of over 70 in 7 of those 8 phases. And that just goes on to show that, why she's not been able to kick on. Like, she's consistently been dotting things up, which has meant that there's been a lot more pressure on her partner. Like Smriti has had to sort of, take the onus upon herself. Later, we saw even Harleen Deol sort of doing a bit of that. And that's where they will probably have to sort of, you know, either give clarity to Pratika that, you know, this is the role that we are expecting off of her, and she needs to sort of, you know, at least milk those singles and ensure she's not dotting things up from her end. Or else they have to make things clear to us that, you know what, this is the role we've given to Pratika. She'll just hold and end up. We are not expecting her to score a lot of runs. We want her to consume those deliveries up top and absorb the pressure. In which case, it needs to be communicated to us. And whatever it is, I think it's a very archaic method if that's what they want to do. It's gone are the days where you can have an opener batting at a strike rate of 40, 50 after facing 50, 60 deliveries consistently. You can have such off days, and that's perfectly fine. But I would imagine they would want to ensure that the strike rate's at least hovering in the 70s and 80s, if not 90s and 100s. 50s and 60s is where you would imagine is probably a bit too low for modern day cricket. And you're just going to create a lot more pressure for your partners. Or again, in the first game, if you really want to give her that benefit of doubt in terms of the run out and everything, and what happened with Smriti, that might have also weighed on her head and whatnot. But even then, yeah, even then, you want to ensure that such things don't happen often. And in the second game as well, like just the way she went about her business, hopefully she will sort of, you know, just understand this and take it in a stride and just become better at run scoring, not boundary scoring necessarily. Run scoring is what I'm looking for, because India also have a Harleen Deol who's a bit of a slow starter herself at number 3, and you can't have 2 out of 3 of your batters or your top 3 doing or starting that way. You need a bit more aggression. So that's that when it comes to Pratika, and of course with Smriti. Oh my goodness, that knock in the second ODI just practically flawless. Some of those shots were breathtaking, and very happy to see her in such good nick. Neha, even in the first ODI, she was in great form. If not for that unfortunate run out, who knows, we might have seen her score 2 centuries in the first couple of games. But all in all, great signs for Team India.
Absolutely, Akshay. I think every single time, Smriti Mandana sort of steps out of the field, people expect a century because that's the kind of reputation she's built, right? And quite living up to it in the first ODI. If not for that unfortunate run out, she could have possibly gone for another 100. But I think the second ODI, she really took her time, was calming Pratika to, I think the partnership she was sort of setting in as wickets around her were falling was quite commendable. And just coming up with that century was just probably the icing on the cake. I think the way she's just rotating the strike, scoring those boundaries. At no point she looked like she was under pressure or was trying to force things out of nowhere, which is I think characteristics Smriti Mandana, right? Hopefully she can again carry on this form to the World Cup where India will sort of need it the most. And Smriti Mandana again, just breaking records left, right, center, right? Now she has. Almost like 12 centuries in total in her career, almost nearing Meg Lanning, who's at 15. And yeah, you just hope that this purple patch sort of continues, because I think a lot of people have this criticism that Smriti doesn't really perform in ICC events. Probably now that she's in the peak of her form and is able to do so well, she'd be able to undo a lot of those claims as well. And yeah, I think this knock again was a perfect reminder of why she is such an important cog in that wheel for India. And third ODI to India will kind of need her to come good. But Loki, I'm hoping that in the third ODI, India gets a chance to chase, right? Because in the 2 ODIs that have happened, India's batted first. We've got an indication of how things are. But probably in the third one, would like to see India chase, a 300 and see where that sort of takes them, just gets them match ready as they look ahead to the World Cup. So yeah, just a hope that we get to see another Smriti special, albeit in a run chase.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo those thoughts, and that was exactly what I was going to talk about next as well. Like, I really hope India get a chance to chase, and that's why that first ODI was a bit disappointing in the sense that you win the toss and then you opted to bat first. Like, I get it that you want to test yourself and all of it, but we also need to understand that Indians themselves haven't been the greatest of chasers, especially when you are competing against the best side in the world. It's not even up for debate. This is your best chance to test yourself too. Yeah, can you chase against such a top side, against such a quality bowling lineup? And I thought that was a chance gone biggie. Now I'm just hoping against hope that at the very least, even if Australia win the toss, they themselves decide to bat first, so that they also challenge themselves if they can defend the total against India in these conditions. So I really hope India get a chase in the third ODI. It will be a bit of a change for both sides. Both would want to try something different and see how that works out, so that they're not sort of caught off guard in the World Cup, if such a situation ever arises. But speaking about the Australian side itself, Neha, that bowling attack and the way it's forming, like in the first ODI they were clinical, but it was also that victory was also down to a lot of missed opportunities on the Indian side's part. Like there were so many drop catches, misfields, and whatnot. You saw good players, the likes of Deepti Sharma, Harmanpreet Kaur, Arundhati Reddy, all of them dropping catches. Something that you don't see often, to be honest. Do you think the Australian side probably have a few chinks in the armor over there?
Yeah, I think first things first, just the number of bowling options that Australia has, right? Clearly more than six bowling options. At any given time, they have someone, just coming in and delivering. But although that gives you a lot of advantage, probably one area of concern which has been commonly brought up too is the fact that they're unable to get you those early wickets, especially in the power play or right at the start. It takes them a lot of time to break that opening stand, which is a matter of concern because I think in both the matches you can see, right, Smriti and Pratika went on to put partnerships of 50 plus, which invariably ends up putting pressure. And Australia can get a little, awry with their line and length, especially at the start too. I mean, in the first ODI, they were still able to pull things back, but in the second one, although they got those wickets at regular intervals, the fact that Smriti was still able to bat on, Deepti Sharma's coming doing her thing, although the scoring rate was getting a little slow, but still India getting to 292, right? Sneh Rana coming in, producing her fireworks. So somewhere I think in discipline with Australia's bowling has been like a big talking point. Again, have to give them the benefit of doubt. They're still acclimatizing to the conditions, just getting used to playing in these conditions. I think in the first ODI too, we could see how much they were struggling with the heat. Elise Perry herself had to retire her, which is not a sign you'd see of an absolute champion batter who's had so much experience on Indian soil, right? But again, that was clearly the state of how things were. And even on the batting front, right? Like it was unfortunate that they were missing Phoebe Litchfield in that second ODI, and again they had to sort of mix and match that batting order. There were like areas of concern that how would that playing 11 stack up, especially the batting side of things, because they just have so many options. Probably this series again will give them an idea of where they sort of want to go. But you could really feel that they were missing out Phoebe Litchfield in that second ODI, because we saw right in the first one the way she was just maneuvering the field, like the way she was just timing the ball, literally, making the Indian bowlers just work incredibly hard. So somewhere I think Australia's batting does look a little iffy. The fact that they haven't played the format for a significant chunk of time, and a lot of those frailties just came out and became very apparent during the second ODI. So probably that lack of discipline with the ball and the batting looking a little iffy were, I think, areas of concern that really, really stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, Phoebe, that was a fantastic knock. She's been, in great form herself. So make no mistake, it was sort of expected, but just to sort of, again, as someone who supports the opposition, Team India, that is, if I want to take any solace, it is from the fact that we did create multiple opportunities against, who is arguably one of the better batters in the world right now, just based on current form. So I would take solace from the fact that we did create those opportunities. Sure, we didn't grab them right now, but hopefully come the crunch situations, and given the caliber that we have in our own side, we should be able to convert them into, dismissals and wickets and whatnot. So that's one thing. And secondly, of course, Phoebe Litchfield not being there in the second ODI would have played a role. But for that, you can also, sort of throw in the point that India also did not have Jenny, for what it's worth. So both sides were basically minus a good batter. So net it sort of equalized, if it makes sense. And it's not like Georgia Wall herself is not good enough. Like they had Georgia Wall, Elisa Healy, then Elise Perry, Annabelle Sutherland. So they had plenty of batters, and for India to do what they did was great. But sticking to the Australian side in terms of their bowling, for me, that pace bowling is definitely a bit sus, if I'm being completely honest. I really thought they could have done away without, one of Darcy Brown or Maiden Shute in the first ODI itself. And in all fairness, in the World Cup, I think they can do away without both of them, because their 11 will anyway have Talia Migra, Annabelle Sutherland, and Elise Perry, three fairly competent pacers. And you saw Elise Perry, rolling her arm over in the first ODI, something she hasn't done too much for, the women in yellow at least. So given that, it clearly shows that Australia are now looking at using her as that potential third pacer. So that would then give them more flexibility to bring in an additional spinner in Sophie Molyneux. So imagine if they can field all of Sophie Molyneux, Ashley Gardner, Alana King, Georgia Wardham, Elise, Talia Migra, and Annabelle Sutherland. And you're like, this is cheating. This is unfair. This is a cheat code. So they should be disallowed from doing anything like that. They should be sanctioned, going by the flavor of what's happening in the current political climate. But jokes apart, coming back, I do believe that is something they should experiment with, because of so many options that they have. There's no point trying to play both Megan Schutt and Darcy Brown. Darcy Brown is, unfortunately, right now she's not there where she can consistently take wickets or bowl good spells. She is very erratic, so she does bowl those jaffas every now and then. But along with those come those boundary hitting deliveries, and that's where oppositions and opponents rather would sort of just cash in on very easily. With Megan Schutt, sure, she's got a lot of experience. She recently played her 100th ODI, in fact, during the first encounter. So there is a lot of experience that comes with her, but I don't think these conditions are suited for someone like her, someone who bowls a lot of those in-dippers and whatnot. She's got a very, very, very conniving slow one, but I don't know how useful would it be with the new ball. And for her to just be an old ball bowler is not an option. And given that they've got Talia Megra, who has a slow one, they've got Annabelle Sutherland, who's got a back of the hand slow one, they've got Elise Perry, who can sort of delve in the in those cutters and whatnot. So they've got those options already. So I don't think Megan Schutt brings anything to the table that the other three don't. Like, in all fairness, I think that slot would be better utilized if they bring in someone like a Sophie Molyneux. A great matchup anyway. Don't have a slow left armer right now in the 11. Someone like her against the right-handers, she could just wreak havoc and sort of make it a lot more easier for the Australian side to run through the batting lineups of their opposition. So those were my 2 cents on that Australian bowling attack. Coming to their batting, I think it is definitely not as strong as it's made out to be, especially with the kind of names. When you think of, okay, Alisa Healy, Elise Perry, Ash Gardner, Phoebe Litchfield, Beth Mooney, all of them are fantastic batters in their own right. Make no mistake. On their day, they are winning you games, period. You don't need to worry about that. Are those days happening frequently enough? Question number one. Are those days happening for multiple batters on the same day? Question number two. And question number three, can they come up with more cohesive performances between both batting and bowling departments? I don't think it is as resounding a yes as it would have been, say, a year or two ago. Sure, Australia is still one of the most strongest sides we've ever seen, and that won't change so easily. To put it very simply, rather, the gulf between Australia and the next best side has definitely reduced significantly compared to 2022, compared to 2017, 2013, and whatnot. So that is definitely a good sign in some sense. And it is probably also down to, them not having acclimatized, like Neha said, to the conditions. It'll take them a bit more time. Of course, you can't expect them to perform from the get-go. There was it was sweltering conditions over there. It was very hot in Chandigarh, so it wasn't easy. And now they will be playing the third ODI in Delhi, which would also be posing a challenge for them. So even then, all things said and done, I do believe the Indian side has a decent shot at winning, the third ODI versus them, especially given the margin they would be backing themselves. And importantly, coming to the final point, India's own bowling, Neha Renuka Singh Thakur. There's a reason why we all wanted her to be back, and she showed why we were missing her, what we were missing in general, with the way she bowled with that new ball.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Renuka Singh Thakur just being back was a major shot in the arm, right, for India, especially in that first ODI. I think a lot of us were just discussing how India was looking very thin on the pace reserve side of things. I mean, putting the entire onus on Kranti Gaur with no one to sort of compliment her at the other end would make life incredibly difficult. But you could see like a sea of difference in the second one where. Just the presence of Renuka Singh Thakur was making Kranti Gaur look like an entirely different sort of bowler, right? The way she was just bowling and, the wickets that she got. And Renuka Singh Thakur from the other end was creating just so much pressure, right? Like Georgia Wall was trying her level best, just to get off the blocks. And then she managed to get her undone. Even, I think the economy at which Renuka was bowling at 4.3, right? It was just phenomenal. One of the best economies in the series open. I know the sample size is really small with just one game, but I really think that India did need that massive addition in the pace bowling department, someone to complement Kranti Gaur, and with Arundhati Reddy also constantly being overlooked or being used like very sparingly, or in occasions where you probably not want. Having someone like Renuka really does come in. As a blessing as well. And the second ODI probably also gave us an idea of how India probably wants that bowling attack to shape up as well, right? That you'd want the two pacers at any given point in time and then beef it up with probably like three spinners too. So I think in that regard, India would be happy. Like again, the second ODI did have India, experiment with three pacers and probably the think three spinners as well. So yeah. So I think in the last ODI too, right, we saw how India sort of went in with that strategy of three pacers and three spinners as well, which was interesting. But it's probably something India may not want to opt for going into the World Cup, because then you'll have someone like a Jemmy and Amanjot coming into the picture, and that's going to be interesting as to how India will shape up that pace attack, because Renuka, in all fairness, looks like a certainty, which means probably Kranti Gaud will have to sit out, and probably Amanjot comes in. Yeah, it's just going to be an interesting one as to how that playing 11 shapes. So I think it's again a discussion for another day as the World Cup sort of closes in. But ideally, you would have wanted everyone who is a part of that World Cup squad to participate in this. But Amanjot's unfortunate injury, sort of puts a spanner in India's plans in that regard. But yeah, let's see how the playing 11 shapes up. But I think so far, yeah, India's bowling is looking like good. The fact that they were able to restrict Australia to like 190, that second ODI, and in the first one too, right? They were actually challenging the Aussies, but then one knock of a certain player sort of took the match away from them. So yeah, I don't think India would be fretting too much on the bowling side of things.
I mean, it made such a big difference, right? Like in the first ODI, they went ahead with that four spinner strategy that worked wonders for them in or during the England tour, but not so much in the first ODI, because the Australian batters, they are so adept at sweeping, so adept at playing square of the wicket, and which is why, despite not having spin friendly conditions back home, just because the batter's technique and the batter's caliber is so high and so strong, they don't need to worry about is it spin friendly, is it top quality spinners, whoever the opposition, they've got answers to most questions that way. But the difference was definitely, in coming to the second ODI, you saw Renuka, Kranti and Arundhati Reddy. And Neha, to answer your question, I know we will be talking about it a lot more in depth when we do our World Cup review. But as things stand, I think Kranti has done enough to leapfrog Arundhati Reddy in that pecking order, for me at least. So when Amanjot Kaur comes in, I do see Arundhati Reddy missing out and not Kranti Gaud, because she's almost made herself undroppable with the way she's been bowling. This fantastic stuff with the new ball, and even in the middle overs, she's got a great Yorker. The way she hits her lengths, I know on occasion she does end up conceding those, boundary deliveries, but there aren't too many of them. And when she bowls those Jaffas, man, like, wow, just fantastic stuff. So fingers crossed she will continue the good work. And for me now, when it comes to the combination, even for the third ODI, assuming Renuka is fit, I do believe they will go ahead with the same combination. And that's where, assuming they want an extra batter, I don't mind them bringing in Tejal Hasabnis for Arundhati Reddy and bringing in Sri Charni for Radha Yadav. I think Sri Charni is a lot more of a capable spinner. I know the second ODI worked out, but that's also due to Smriti Mandana's individual brilliance. I don't think it's a very sustainable approach, backing on one of your batters to sort of go really big. That's why they would want at least one more top quality batter, and Tejal Hasabnis can be just that. So if they bring in Tejal Hasabnis who can bat at number 5 and Sri Charni instead of Radha Yadav, I think that bowling would still be a lot more well-rounded. If you have 5 bowlers, I'd rather have Sri Charni as the 5th bowler ahead of Radha Yadav. I know Radha Yadav offers a greater package in terms of her fielding abilities, her batting prowess and whatnot. But all things said and done, I would be focusing primarily on how good a bowler that slot is. And for me, Sri Charni right now is the better or the more informed spinner, to put it very simply. So these are the two changes that I would be looking at personally, just to see how that combination works out. It also lets all of the other batters bat in their natural position, because if Tejal comes in all likelihood, she will be batting at number 5 in place of Jemmy, which means Richa will bat at her customary number 6 position, which means Deepthi at number 7, then you got Sneha at number 8, 9, 10, 11 would be Sri Charni, Renuka Singh Thakur, Kranti Gaud in any order. So I would want them to play this combination just so that we know how it's shaping up for everyone. So Neha, thoughts on that? Anything that you would want to change in the third ODI?
Yeah, Akshay, I think I agree with you on this one. Probably India was a batter short in that second ODI. And as you rightly said, because Smriti Mandana played so well, probably it didn't come out so apparently. But then I think, people who are closely following the game also would sort of agree that everyone was sort of batting out of position. And it just ends up putting a lot of pressure on someone like the Richa too, who's not adept to playing so many overs, and we'd rather, use her as a finisher, Archib as a finisher coming in later. So I'd agree with you that bringing in Tejal would really add a lot of depth to that batting and just give her some much needed match practice in case things go south. We kind of need to slot her in for that World Cup, and even Sri Charni too, right? I think she's just been doing so well like throughout ever since she sort of gave us an indication of what she's capable of at the WPL onto the international stage as well. I think she would relish, just bowling on these pitches, and I think her coming in for someone like an Arundhati would make sense. So India can see, how the spin department is shaping as well. Again, the heart does go out to someone like an Arundhati, but right now, I think the way the team is just shaping up, it looks a little different and it looks a little difficult too in that regard. I mean, if Arundhati is that sort of beefs up the batting, but I think that second ODI, she just looked very out of sorts with that batting side of things. Completely undone by Darcy Brown, who was just bowling that that outfield was just giving that pitch was just giving her something entirely different too, right? So I mean, there are pros and cons of this, but definitely agree with you that India could really benefit from having that additional batter, and who better than Tejan, who was named as that replacement. So everyone retains their usual batting order, and it just helps India gel better cohesively as a team.
Yeah, I mean, the third ODI starts at 1:30 p.m. sharp, and it's coming live from the Arun Jaitley Stadium in Delhi, which is not one of the World Cup venues, but it is still a venue in India, and that gives enough match practice for both sides. So that's the decider. The scoreline right now reads 1-1. Let's see who will come out on top and enter the World Cup feeling chuffed about it. Talking about the next bilateral, very close to Delhi that way. The game's happening in Lahore, Meha. Pakistan taking on South Africa. At the time of the recording, just one ODI has been done and dusted. The second ODI will be starting in a while. What did you make of that first ODI? 3 centuries and South Africa pulling off a fantastic win with that chase. Happy about what you've seen?
Yeah, actually, I think really pleased with what I've seen. Pakistan again is a team that often just goes under the radar. A lot of people don't rate them so highly, but under Fatima Sana, they just look like an entirely different unit. I think they were batting first. They scored like some 250 odd. I would have sort of expected them to go, even more and make. I think Muniba Ali at 76, had that potential to sort of capitalize and take it all the way to a century. But then we saw Sidra Amin do Sidra Amin things and score a very clinical century. Again, a lot of people will bring in the argument of strike rate and she could have probably done a lot more. But again, it's important to take into account that wickets around her were falling and they had lost Shawal Zulfikar, who was batting up the orders. You needed someone to sort of stabilize, take it as deep as possible. And I think when someone had tweeted this, that nowadays having scores of 250, 260 is also clearly not enough, because women's ODIs are clearly heading in a different directions where teams would kind of give it on themselves to sort of chase it down. And that's exactly what happened, right? Laura Wolfart again dismissed early. She's just been in that sort of a rut, not able to get runs as much as the quality that we have seen her do. But Tasman Britsman, once again, another century, another iconic celebration as well. It was just very heartening to see her, just get off the blocks and do her things. I think a lot of Tasman Brits FC fans would be able to relate to this. But really pleased to see her score those runs. And Marzan Kaap, once again, coming in and scoring a sublime century, ensuring that Pakistan is clearly out-batted in this match. They were clearly out of the reckoning too, right? And when you're defending a total of 255 against a quality South African unit like this, which has batting that's pretty deep, right? I mean, South Africa clearly did fancy their chances to go all the way, leaving, rendering that Pakistan attack quite toothless. I think South Africa would take a lot of, like a world of confidence from this win that, we have two of our batters scoring centuries and we are heading into the second ODI with a lot of momentum in our side. So, yeah, I think they'd be mighty pleased with that performance. But Pakistan probably has a little bit of introspection to do. And maybe in the second ODI, if they put to bat again, we'll be able to form our opinion even more as to, where they are headed.
I mean, it was an interesting performance, to be honest. Like, a million words came to my mind when it came to how I want to describe, Sidra Amin's knock, but clinical wouldn't have been one of them. And again, I know Neha and I are at odds when it comes to this. Great knock, good on her to be able to sort of stay in there, hang in there for that long. But once again, my only question is, if your batter is going to face 150 deliveries, you would want her to score a lot more than just the 121 she did. And especially because she remained unbeaten till the end. So, like, that's where I really think, Pakistan need to be a lot more proactive. And in fact, last week as well, we spoke about, the inclusion of Iman Fatima and what it means to the side. I was really hoping to see her, make it into the 11 in place of, say, even a Sidra Nawaz, because they have Muniba Ali who can keep, so they don't need another keeper in the 11. And Iman Fatima just sort of can be that aggressor. Alia Riaz was doing that. Unfortunately, she ran herself out. With Muniba Ali as well, like, that's where I don't mind Muniba Ali playing that sort of an odd, because Muniba Ali has shown that she's got those gears. Eventually, she somehow does sort of, play that catch-up game well enough to at least end the knock at a strike rate of 90-95 if she's going to face 120-130 deliveries. Now, that's not happening with Sada. Like, 150 deliveries ke baad a strike rate of 80 is, like, you would expect more, especially like you said, Neha, because this day and age, 250, 260 is the score that oppositions would be comfortable chasing. In fact, they would fancy themselves chasing it down. And that's where if you want to score 280, 290, and the batter who's played half of that, or half of your quota of 300 deliveries is not scoring 140, 150, then that's already sort of, you playing a losing battle in some sense. And I know it sounds a bit harsh, but great knock. I mean, the fact that she was able to stay there for 150 deliveries, that's again fantastic. It's not so easy. I know it's not easy, but even then, I would be expecting more from them, because clearly they have that potential to sort of just go one notch above and sort of win games like these. Muniba Ali, unfortunately, was also the recipient of an umpiring howler. That was a fake inside edge. Yeah, you could see it. Like, first look, you didn't even have to look at the slow mos, and you could see how disappointed she was when the umpire sort of raised the finger. You could see she was like, "Yaar, bat laga hai, bhai, kya kar raha hai?" I mean, apologies for those who don't understand Hindi. She was basically cribbing about the fact that she hit it, but that was slightly unfortunate. And Fatima Sana as well. Unfortunately, she came in the 43rd, 44th over, if I'm not wrong, and she got out very soon. Maybe had she stayed there for another 5-6 overs or till the end of the innings, Pakistan could have registered a total in excess of 270 to 80 even, and that could have potentially been the difference between winning and losing, to be honest. Because sure, South Africa lost just the 2 wickets, but it's not like their strike rates were very high either. Like, Tasman Brits, all things said and done, once again, she did score a century. She's got a brilliant conversion rate. She's had 650, 50 plus scores so far, and 4 of them have been converted into centuries. So good on her for being able to do that. But strike rate is definitely still a bit of a concern. She's got that muscle power. She's got all of it that's needed to sort of, clear these boundary lines with ease. I wonder sometimes what's stopping her from that. Like, what's stopping her from just sort of, crossing that threshold and sort of become that boundary hitter, that ace boundary hitter that South Africa would love to have. That's when Marisan Kaur, once again, brilliant knock, start to finish. She just kept piling on the pressure continuously. At no point in time did it seem like she was getting stuck in. She was dotting things up. She was constantly running singles and twos and whatnot, hitting those odd boundaries as well to finish with a strike rate of 95. That was great to see. And happy to see Sadia Agbal. Once again, Sadia bowling is it's genuinely poetry in motion for me. I love watching Sadia take the new ball and bowl it. In fact, last week I spoke about how I'm expecting Sadia to take Tasman's wicket in at least 2 of the 3 games. Wasn't to be the case. There were a couple of edges that she managed to, sort of get out of Tasman, and outside edge and inside edge, but none of them really resulted in a wicket. But she did clean Laura Wolfart up. Hopefully, in the next couple of games, she can add more to her wickets tally, because she is going to be very crucial to Pakistan. And Fatima Sana with the ball as well, unfortunately, wasn't very effective. She conceded a fair few runs herself. Did look in that kind of rhythm you usually expect from her. There were a lot of loose deliveries. And if they are able to tight these few things up, because Rameen Shameen, fantastic spell, conceded at less than 3 runs per over, in her quota of 10. So that was fantastic to watch. If Fatima, Sadia, all of them chip a lot more than they have, considering the seniority that they possess, I do believe this is a Pakistani side that can potentially, come up with an upset or two during the World Cup. So it'll be interesting to see how they play the second ODI. And I hope they somehow squeeze Iman Fatima into the 11, because you need a bit more of momentum in that top order, especially given how Muniba Ali and Sidra Amin are going to fare. If they are going to play over 100, 150 deliveries, are going to still be at a strike rate of 70, 80, and that might not cut it right now. So those are my thoughts on that. When it comes to South Africa, though, their bowling was genuinely disappointing in all fairness. It's the batting that won them the game, because the bowling looked toothless. It just there were hardly any opportunities created. Once again, I will give them some benefit of doubt because this was their first game. In these conditions, the heat must have definitely taken to them. It wouldn't have been easy, so they need some time getting used to these conditions and all of it. But even then, the bowling, and like we spoke about this last week as well, especially with that spin attack. Sure, you've got Shangazi, sure, you got Malaba, sure, you got Sunil, but none of them really sort of, put their hand up and said, yeah, you know what, I'll be the lead spinner, I'll be the one taking the responsibility of taking wickets, of restricting runs. None of that was happening. If anything, it was Tumi Setukune who actually looked very good in the first few overs that she bowled. And apart from that, Ibonga Khaka to some extent, Maizan Cup was, of course, Maizan Cup, but she didn't bowl herself out. I'm guessing they're also managing the workload and ensuring that she's fully fit ahead of the World Cup. So they will be a lot more cautious with the way they use Maizan Cup. And that's why, yeah, someone like even a Dirksen, almost every over she bowled at least two boundary deliveries. And she needs to cut down on that. And that's where the South African side will definitely be expecting a lot more from her. And it was interesting that, they picked someone like Miani Smith instead of Chloe Chan. I don't know if it was just preserving Chan for the World Cup because she recently played the 100 and got herself some much needed rest this way. But Neha, thoughts on that South African lineup and especially the way they bowled in the first ODI?
Yeah, it did look like one of the most, like well-oiled units, sort of a bowling performance, right? I know they had Marzan Kap and Ibonga Khaka, sort of lead the charge, and Ibonga Khaka, to her credit, also gotten those two wickets. But then even just the rest of the bowling, right, wasn't exuding a lot of confidence. Nondumiso Shangase going at what economy of more than 8. Malaba herself was looking slightly off rhythm too. Tumi Sekukune, again, chipped in with that wicket, but probably would have expected a lot more. I think even we will discuss this when we talk about South Africa for that World Cup review series as well. The spin bowling side of things really looks, entirely dependent on just a couple of players. That's when you need someone like Chloe Tryon or Sunil East, sort of chip it, because the entire onus then ends up falling on Manaba too. Hopefully, as the series progresses, South Africa will have more people sort of step up with the ball and do that, because Pakistan again, had they gotten a few things right, could have gone for a target in excess of like maybe a 270 or a 280, and that would reflect very poorly on South Africa, right? If they weren't able to get those early wickets, so you'd hope that the bowling unit again just gels well and is able to produce such performances, restrict the opposition, because versus Pakistan itself, you're going at like 250 plus. You can just imagine what the situation will be like when they face tougher teams as the World Cup sort of approaches. So a little bit of introspection for South Africa. Hopefully they don't press the panic button. They do have the options. It's just about leveraging and using them in a better manner. Yeah.
Very interested to see, of course, how the second ODI plays out. And once again, at the time of the recording, the second ODI is about 3 or 4 hours away from start of play. So unfortunately, we won't be able to add much to our conversation in terms of what happens in the second ODI. But let's see how that pans out. Of course, the World Cup, of course, begins on the 30th of September. So this is crucial game time for each of these sides that are playing. And there are two other sides that are playing a bunch of practice games right now, Neha. The Tolerance Oval in Abu Dhabi, a very unlikely venue in some sense, given that the World Cup itself is happening in South Asia, so they probably could have come closer home. But I mean, whatever floats their boat, the conditions are fairly similar in terms of the geography and whatnot. England taking on New Zealand, one ODI done and dusted, and that was an interesting result, to be honest.
Absolutely, Akshay. I think both of these teams, doing their own thing, just playing practice games as they'd like to call it, just getting that much required match practice and just to get into the group before the World Cup is important. England eventually did end up winning the match by 3 wickets. I think we were discussing off record as well how interesting that batting order was, looking with almost Emma Lamb coming in so late, Danny Whitehorse coming in so late, but it just felt like they were trying to get the much needed practice there. Again, couldn't make a lot of the game because I didn't have a chance to watch the game. Was just seeing it through scorecards and just the tidbits of highlights that were available. I think Matt Green, right, really shining with the century, has been such a beacon lately for New Zealand, right, piling on the runs. And just her performance in the past year or so has been really, really good. Even someone like a Georgia Plummer, right, just excited to see how she sort of fares in the World Cup. And I think what New Zealand got to a 281 or so, and you'd think that, okay, that hey, probably this feels like a competitive total. And England too, right? In their run chase, again they stuck with the trusted duo of AB Jones, Tammy Bowen to do their thing, but both were dismissed early on. I think at one point they were like 118 for five. They looked like they were in a spot of bother, and that's where you had Emma Lamb sort of stand up and deliver. They had Alice Capsey coming in, and I think eventually probably Danny Whitehurst, just giving the finishing touches to sort of ensure a win. And I think what was something that went on to the last over. So I think yeah, England would still pride themselves, being able to put out a performance like this that did feel scratchy in any regard. They did lose some wickets, but I think this was again to just get their batting group, some sort of practice. Because in an ideal case scenario, you wouldn't have batting that goes on to like 7, 8 with like your top flight batters coming in that regard. So yeah, I think it was a good match, interesting one. And I think there's probably two more matches like this for both the sides to iron out a few deficiencies and yeah, sort of see where they go from there.
I mean, much needed game time for both sides. I know these were warm up games, so they were played that way as well. It wasn't a fixed 11-a-side encounter. So batters batted, bowlers bowled. So it was one of those kind of games, and which is why you saw, like I said, Danny Whitehurst batting at number 8. So they got that batting that elusive batting that unfortunately the main side cannot boast of. But a major talking point for me has to be Heather Knight and her comeback. It was very good to see. There wasn't a lot of replays available, but there were clips available of a few boundaries and whatnot. And Heather Knight's batting was also something you could catch a glimpse of. And very happy to see her come back. And she almost looked like she never left the field. Yeah, 41 or 48 looked very much at ease. Did not score a lot of boundaries. Just milking singles, doubles, timing the ball, just sort of soaking it all in and getting used to the frailties and the nitty-gritties of playing top tier cricket. And yeah, it was very, very, very good to see her back, because once again, this English side was missing the experience of Heather Knight, and her being back in this English side definitely makes it a lot more stronger. And make no mistake, they are going to be bloody hell good contenders for that trophy. So that was one thing. And secondly, for me, when it came to New Zealand, happy to see Maddie Green bat the way she did. Once again, a very, very important knock for her, because this Kiwi side, I don't know what to make of that batting. You've got Georgia Plummer. We saw what she did in the World Cup last year. She did actually show why, she could potentially be that, sort of successor to Sophie Devine when it comes to opening with Susie Bates and whatnot. But to see that batting lineup of Bates, Plummer, then you've got Amelia Kerr, Sophie Devine, Maddie Green now coming good. You've got someone like an Izzy Gaze. Interesting. But I don't know, like I'm pretty sure Brooke Halliday will also feature somewhere over there. And you've got someone like a Fiona Devonshire, who's been picked ahead of Fran Jonas, and someone who's actually rated pretty highly by folks who follow New Zealand cricket, keenly, a left-hand batter who also bowls slow left-armers. Did not get a lot of batting time in the first game, but definitely someone who can add a lot of value to the Kiwi side. Imagine her in the top order, along with Eden Carson, along with Amelia Kerr. That's a very good troika to have in terms of covering all your bases. And then you've got Rosemary Mayer, you've got Sophie Devine in great bowling form. You've got Jessica if you want to use her. So not too bad in all fairness. And make no mistake, I forgot the experience Via Takuhu, of course. So I do believe that this side has the makings of a side that can punch above its weight. So a typical Kiwi side in that sense. This is one of those sides you would want to imagine, okay, you know what, this is a side that can be beaten by my side. And then on their day, they just come and blow you away and you're like, wait, what just happened? In fact, we all are privy to what happened on the 4th of October 2024, when India took on New Zealand in that first World Cup encounter last year. But yeah, so hopefully, for the Kiwi fans and for cricket fans in general, the Kiwi side will be able to sort of punch above its weight, because the more these sides, play well, the better the competitiveness, the better the performances, and importantly, better the viewing experience for folks like us. So all in all, it is looking well. And with this English side also now bolstered by some additions, I do think both sides are doing well. They'll just now want to tweak their combinations, try and test out a few more players and see what's happening, what's not happening. And then from there, yeah, hopefully come the 3rd of October, which is when England play their first game in Guwahati, yeah, you might see a very strong and well-oiled English side taking the field. So yeah, very, very nice to see that. And yeah, anything more to add?
Yeah, Akshay, I think just excited to see how the rest of those practice games sort of pan out for England, right? Again, it would just really help them get game ready come the World Cup. I know they're coming off of a massive loss at home to India, and I'm sure that wouldn't be playing in their minds as much because now you have the return of certain key players. And I know this is a prediction that's too early to make, but then England and New Zealand do look like contenders, right, for a top four finish. Probably, with the likes of Australia and India. So probably, yeah, the series again just serving all the kind of action we need, and probably even better come the World Cup.
Definitely, and a small correction. I feel I said Fiona Devonshire, it's Flora Devonshire. I just wanted to correct myself on that. But yeah, swiftly moving on, of course, to the next topic, which is Barbados Royals win the WCPL again, thrice in the last 4 years, and this time without even Hayley Matthews. Like, kya chala? What on earth is happening? How? Like, I'm sorry, I really want to crib, but Guyana Amazon Warriors, Trinidad Knight Riders, please get your act together, man. What on earth are you guys doing there? Neha, like, क्या चल रहा है यार?
Actually, again, I think we have spoken time and again. We might even sound like broken records. The WCPL definitely has to expand, right? Because the Barbados Royals clearly seem to be playing in a league of their own. In fact, the league can be renamed after them because of the number of times they won. Just kidding. But this tournament too, right? Barbados Royals won all of their league matches. They go on to win the tournament. No surprises. Healy Matthews was missing. Chanel Henry steps up, and it's just that Barbados Royals has the best of the best players. Like Shriyanka Patil herself was playing. You had even someone like Chamari Attapaddu, right, who time and again was coming in with such crucial cameos and knocks. And just the makeup of Barbados Royals was just something else, right? The presence of just so many good overseas players. You had someone like a Courtney Webb, who time and again was coming in with performances of repute. Kiara Joseph too. A lot of people have reservations against the way she goes about her thing, but again, the fact that at times she was able to step in with a few cameos, and just the presence of so many important West Indies players just made them an entirely different unit. I think Trinidad Knight Riders had probably the most forgettable campaign, losing all of their four matches. At no point did they look like they were coming close to a win, which meant the final was between Barbados and Guyana Amazon Warriors, which was the second best team. And even then, right, Barbados just chasing down the target. The final was quite an interesting one, Akshay. It absolutely went down to the wire, final over. You have someone like Shriyanka at the crease who was just sort of finishing things off. I still say that Guyana did put in some sort of a fight, but Barbados, man, they just felt like they were a whole other team in this tournament, and that's why hopefully our pleas, our calls, our cries for expanding the WCPL finally comes to fruition. We get to see a more competitive league because and the kind of talent it attracts from across the globe, hopefully more in the future. You deserve a league, which kind of puts all the teams on an equal footing in that regard. This is again not to take away anything from Barbados in the kind of campaign they had, but the other teams were just, way behind the pecking order, and they were just not able to put in any fight, which was clearly apparent. Again, a lot of people will give us flack that hey, how can you make these reductions out of just 6 matches, 7 matches? But yeah, that's probably again how the tournament itself can have more matches. Chalo, if you have three teams, that's fine. But at least have them play against each other a lot more, right? Make it like a whole expansive tournament. Probably this time around, the World Cup is close by, so they didn't want to compete with a massive event like that. But West Indies, man, too good a side to not, feature in the World Cup. But again, that's taking us on a tangent. With the WCPL again, in whatever little we got to saw Barbados Royals once again dominate and etch their names in history, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been as comprehensive and dominant a performance as any. And I do agree with you. If not, at least the number of teams which would be ideal, then at least increase the number of games that they're playing against each other. Something we spoke about last week or a couple of weeks ago as well. Like, just let each of these sides play each other 4 times, 2 at home, 2 away, and just double the number of games they play. And that way, at least you have a larger sample size to sort of make your deductions to understand who's been the better side and who's been the better player, importantly, and whatnot. But in all fairness, I'll have to admit Barbados Royals without Hayley Matthews, Neha, I thought all three teams rather began on an equal footing, especially because Hayley Matthews is like 3 or 4 players rolled into one herself in terms of the performances, in terms of how many games she single-handedly wins for her sides. Her not being there meant that, yeah, Barbados almost looked weaker in some sense compared to some of the other sides because what you had Courtney Webb, you had someone like Chamari Attapaddu playing for you. So it wasn't exactly, the strongest of overseas core, so to say. And along with that, of course, you've got Shriyanka Patil, but again, this is Shriyanka Patil who's coming in from an injury, who hadn't played top tier cricket in nearly a year. So you didn't know what to expect from her. Given that, that's where I felt, Guyana and Trinbago, man, you really have to sort of look deep. Um, with Ghana Amazon Warriors, unfortunately, that Laura Harris experiment came to bite them at the worst time possible in the very last over of the final. And it was always an experiment, irrespective of how many wickets she took. Those moon balls weren't going to be something successful in the long term, and it just showed. In all fairness, yeah, again, Guyana Amazon Warriors had to defend 19 of the last 2 overs. They'd already picked up 7 wickets. It was Shriyanka Patil and Alia Alain in the middle. You had Molly Penfold bowling that penultimate over. The odds were heavily stacked in Guyana Amazon Warriors' favor. If anything, this was their game to lose, and that's exactly what they did. They conceded a flurry of boundaries to Alia Alain, and then, of course, Laura Harris had only 4 runs to defend, and that was never going to be enough. So all in all, definitely disappointed in the sense that I've never been a fan of streaks like these where it's just the same side winning again and again. And this is where like Guyana had a very good chance, and with Trinbago Knight Riders, I mean, it was a classic case of Murphy's law just playing out, because you can say that even for Guyana Amazon Warriors, a couple of days before the tournament began, all of their overseas pros sort of announced that they won't be available, which meant they had to bring in fresh reinforcements in Molly Penfold, in Amy Hunter, in Danifani Kirk. But I don't think those were bad signings at all, and that's why with TKR. Deandra Doughton did not fire as intended. Jess Jonathan had one great knock, but apart from that, nothing really to show for. And Shikha Pandey, not too bad with the bat, but then in the last game, you saw her bat up the order. There was such a funky top order that they went for. Deandra Doughton opening, they had Shikha Pandey batting at number 5. In fact, they tried Jazra Claxton at number 3 in a couple of games. They tried Janelia Glasgow at number 3 in a couple of games. They tried Zaida James, at number 3 in a game or two. So there was just too much chopping and changing. Because in all fairness, if we are just talking about domestic core, I thought TKR had the strongest domestic core. They had Zaida James, they had Janelia Glasgow, they had Jazra Claxton, they had Deandra Doughton, they had someone like Rashida Williams as well. So I did feel that there was that core was there. There was a lot of potential, and a lot of them are playing consistently and regularly for the national side as well. But yeah, it just did not really pan out as well as they would have intended it to. Deandra Dortmund just had a season to forget, in all fairness. And yeah, I mean, that's played a very big role, especially when you are going to depend on some of your key performers, and if they don't perform, then they don't perform. So it was a tad bit unfortunate for them, and hopefully a bit more game time will allow these players also just to get used to the conditions a lot more easily, and that would mean better results, better performances. So still a good starting point for sure. It is the fact that there is a WCPL happening, that's already great. Now it's important to just sort of, take it a step up. And yeah, hopefully that can happen in a year or two. But all in all, still great games, fantastic vibes, great jerseys, of course. So happy to see that happening. And I guess, yeah, matlab, that's that from the WCPL. Not much to talk about. In fact, just the 2 games that happened apart from the final in the last week. So not a lot of games per se. Last bit, of course, Neha, the Afghanistan side, or rather, I'm forgetting what are they called, the Afghan refugee side, if that's what they're being called right now, will be traveling to India during the World Cup to play a bunch of games against local domestic teams, and importantly, they'll also be catching the World Cup games live. That's a huge update.
Absolutely, Akshay. I think this week, really the one news that caught my attention and really made me happy was this one, right? The fact that the refugee team gets to square off against a few local sides. Actually, in fact, we just go to our last conversation as bringing up that point, right? Like, why is there no update? Like, will the Afghan team really not get a chance to play, or even just be a part of this World Cup in some capacity? And the fact that finally, I think our pleas prayers have been heard, and something is happening in that regard. I think it's massive, right, for the refugee team to just play a few matches against the domestic teams. No one cares about the results. The fact that just getting out there, doing what they love, and yeah, the results are at this point in time just a byproduct for them, just for them to just enjoy the game. I think that's going to be like the absolute pinnacle, right? And even for a lot of these domestic teams, they will be participating in something that's so noble. And even for the ICC, right, to just include them into the fold, slowly just get them back. The task force is eventually going to come into play where, you will see the establishment of like high performance centers to just streamline it again. sort of root them back into the setup in some shape, form, capacity is, I think, a massive, massive positive. So big ups to the ICC on this. Hopefully, nothing goes wrong, nothing goes south, and the entire process happens very smoothly without any other concerns. And hopefully, it's a good learning curve for both sides, not just for the Afghan refugee team that's participating, but even for the domestic players who get a chance to square off against them. And hopefully, the girls have a good time at some of the World Cup matches as well. Would love to see how they sort of just get used to these Indian conditions and the whole craze that this World Cup is hopefully going to bring in with a lot of fans and spectators. So yeah, just massive, massive positives, at least from the outset.
100% agree with you there. In fact, they did play a few games earlier this year as well in April, if I'm not wrong, just to sort of kickstart that initiative that, Mel Jones had pioneered. I hope I'm getting the name. I usually say Mel Gibson. Thankfully, this time I got it right. Beg your pardon, Mel. We would love to have you as well someday on our podcast. But very happy to see them sort of, get this opportunity. And like Neha said, I don't think anyone would be bothered about the results right now. Does that mean they don't want to be competitive? Absolutely not. It's just that right now they just want to revel in the fact that they are getting to play and represent that country they all come from and just play the sport. And that's what we all are talking about. Just getting a chance to play the sport that we all love. And that's that's very heartening to see this go through. So hopefully, they'll get that experience and maybe even learn a bit from this experience and understand how to cope in different conditions and what do they have to do. And importantly, if they get a chance to rub shoulders with some of the best in the world during the World Cup, then nothing like it as well, right? Imagine some of them getting a chance to sort of just have a conversation with Elise Petty, with Harmanpreet Kaur, with someone else. That's just fantastic. And hopefully we will see some of that too. And yeah, this is great for the sport in general and the Afghan refugees, based all over the world in particular. So very happy to see that. And on that happy note, I think it is time for us to wrap up this episode of the Women's Cricket Podcast. That is episode number 35. A bit of a milestone, like Neha said up top. And I don't know, it could also potentially be one of the last episodes in some sense that we might be putting up on this platform. And yeah, just wanted to give you guys a heads up, like we said up top. Once again, from our end, in terms of our opinions, we will try and be as civil as possible. If we ever think, or if you guys ever think we've crossed the line, you can always feel free to let us know. And we actually feel that we will definitely make sure that we do apologize. But make no mistake, we aren't here to sort of just take out our personal vendetta at someone. In fact, I don't think we even have anything like that. We love each of these cricketers and we really hope that they all do well for their respective nations. And hopefully we will see you guys soon on the other side, hopefully on a different platform very soon. And of course, we will keep you guys updated over here itself, so you don't need to worry about it. Until then, please make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to us like always. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cricket! Cricket!